I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. I remember us getting hearing tests as kids at school, which is weird when you think about it. So they would have those big, like, brown headphones.
They're so uncomfortable.
And it would play tones.
Yeah.
In your ear. And then I don't remember them gauging... Like, so what if they were just trying to figure out what frequencies we could hear? Because highly sensitive people would be able to hear frequencies that other people wouldn't be able to hear.
That's what I've heard, that there's like many different levels and like different practices within that gifted, what is it called? Gifted.
Gate is what other people are saying, which is interesting because Gateway Project.
Right. Gifted
and talented something, but in Portland, it was called TAG. It was talented and gifted.
I've heard other people mention that too. Yeah, and so it was always presented as like, this is a hearing test or like speech therapy, but that's not really what it was. Is like beyond that, it was a advanced test that they were looking for markers that point to a certain kid having somewhat superpower kind of abilities. And so that's what, like, I remember doing it in elementary school specifically, and it was around a time that I was like maturing. It was like a benchmark. So it was probably around 5th grade or something. I just remember it was like transitioning as I was either leaving the school or I was like maturing in some weird way. And that's what it made sense. So there's like this new test that everybody goes to. And I feel like I only went like 3 or 4 times, but it was like scheduled regularly for a bit. And then it just stopped and I never did it anymore. But I'm wondering if like, because some people have reported, yeah, they did that for a long time and then they started going elsewhere. They would like get called out of class to go to a different building or a different place to do a deeper test. And it was all around like, you're gifted, you're really talented. We want to, help you with that.
Well, so like tag. Well, so there were these tests. There were weird tests. And when you think back, it's like, why were they testing for the things they were testing for? You had scoliosis. We would expose our spines to these teachers or like whatever to check for that. I don't ever remember an eye test at school. But I definitely had to listen to those tones. I want to say multiple times, but I don't know if it was like different years or whatever. But I definitely remember the hearing test. Tag was usually the teacher would recommend talented and gifted kids. And then those kids would go take a test or whatever, be evaluated. But then the tag kids, it was like every Tuesday or something. Those kids went somewhere else and did school either at a different school or they were like in a different classroom within the school. And yeah, thinking back to the kids that I remember being in tag, definitely autistic now when I think back. Spectrum, right? Nobody was acknowledging autism spectrum at all. But when I think about like how those kids kind of carried themselves, I feel like now I can see, I'm like, oh, autistic. I was never considered for anything like that until 6th grade. I performed at and I was like very bad at school. So I started straight up failing as soon as school became less of, we would get like plus minus. And as soon as it started being grades, like I was failing. And so in 6th grade, probably one of the most traumatic years of my life. Like my mom's addiction was at like a fever pitch. She had tweakers living in the house with their fucking horrible kids. And I was just being abused by multiple different people while going through early puberty, and was in 6th grade and was like really not popular, or was like a cross between invisible and made fun of. They had a talent show and I lip sang like a prayer, lip synced, whatever. Like a prayer. This is
the one that you like crushed it, right?
Yeah. Like a Prayer by Madonna. And the talent show was mostly very popular kids. But when I tell you I fucking murdered this performance, and was the most popular kid in school for like, I don't know, 24 hours. Because the entire school was there. It was like an assembly. And immediately was approached by an administrator with the school that was like, we want to send you to a tag thing. And so within a couple weeks, I was bused or like driven in a car to another school where I was in a room full of kids auditioning for being gifted in performance. But there was a second talent show that day. And so I was so obsessed with doing the second talent show that I bombed this. I also can't audition for things. There's something fake about the audition part that makes it very difficult for me to do. And so I ended up just not trying very hard. And the only thing I remember was they wanted me to do an impression of picking an apple from a tree. And when I think back to it, I was way overacting. So I got driven back to school as quickly as possible so that I could bomb in the next talent show. And the lesson I took from that was I never should have done a Paula Abdul song. I should have stuck with Madonna. So I ended up bombing on that and running off the stage. Anyway, so I didn't get put into tag, but very strange that it was like immediately swooped up, you know, by someone who's like not a teacher, doesn't know me at all, just is like, oh, there's something there, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't think, so what we're talking about is the conspiracy theory now that talented and gifted or gifted and talented programs were actually a CIA thing to try to catch what I assume is there's a massive infiltration of higher consciousness beings that came into the planet in the 70s and the 80s, the indigo children, to kick this party off, right? And so they were trying to catch them, is what I understand. So the people who were in gifted and talented don't remember most of it. A lot of them. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from people in the comments if you were in it. A lot of them say they covered up the windows. That part is so fucking strange to me. And if I remember correctly, the windows were covered up in the audition, but I don't remember anything weird from the audition.
Yeah, and for my classes, it was definitely no windows. It was in this weird closet. And the only reason I'm like, the
hearing test was in a closet for sure.
Yeah, it's in a weird closet, and I kept going back to one, but it was because I had a speech impediment. I had like a lisp, which I still have, kind of. That
how Chiron and Gemini.
That's what was presented as why I was having to go back all the time. But I didn't have, like, when I've done research on it online, a lot of people that remember a certain game that they made them play that had these like specific colored like little chips you're putting in, and that was like, actually, it turns out that's an old Israeli game. There's something to it, and I'm assuming that there was something to when you played that game, people that were really powerful or had some kind of sensitivity ability, like, were able to get really far with that game, and that must mean something, you know? And a lot of other things that I've seen online that haven't triggered too many memories, but like I don't have a lot of clear memories from elementary school, but I can vividly see that room, hear the guy's voice, and feel those headphones on my head because they were so damn uncomfortable. And feeling a little bit of a like special attention from teachers around that wasn't like a thing where we're trying to help you with your speech. It was like there was some other kind of special thing to it that the kids weren't allowed to kind of connect. It was just like, oh yeah, my friend is out of class right now because he's in that thing, or like they're missing this period because they're at a special class doing something. So yeah, I don't know if I maybe like was tested and then didn't meet the, you know, the requirements, and I didn't go anymore. And so I never had, unless it's some repressed memory, anything else that like makes me think I was a part of that. But I see how it was one of two things. Is either that, like you're saying, they were trying to stop powerful kids from coming in, or they were trying to actually find powerful kids that they could then groom and kind of enhance their perceptions, these abilities, so then they could use them in remote viewing programs and all these like psychological programs that around the time we were growing up was like still, I think it was pretty secret in the government, but it was like they were in full operation, still doing this remote viewing and trying to understand that whole thing. So it makes sense that they would monitor young kids that have some of these abilities that then they can control their reality and their perception, so they use those abilities for them,
right?
And think that they're special and all of that, and not realize that this is something that if they embrace without being guided, that they could actually, you know, awaken and kind of get themselves out of the reality. So it would make sense. It was almost like a dual thing. Like, yes, stop it, but they're trying to hijack and use the abilities for their own, you know, governmental operations and stuff. It makes sense to me. Like, that's, of course they would do that. And I think that has probably stopped. It's not quite as intense anymore, but
I don't even know if they still have talented and gifted programs in school.
I don't either. And I would imagine they would like kind of change the name of it. And
Do schools still have talented and gifted programs?
change the image of it because it's obviously a pretty talked about controversy. Like right now, a lot of people are talking about it.
I feel like you and I have to watch finish watching the show Severance. It keeps coming up, and apparently the first 3 episodes are boring, which was, I think, where we fell off.
Yeah.
But
it looks good. I keep seeing clips, and it does look like it's got some really cool information in it.
Yeah. So the premise of Severance is that the guy's working for some sort of top secret company, so he has agreed to have his consciousness split in half so that he has the version of him that's in the building and the version of him that's outside the building, so that, I guess, so it's not a liability that he has the company's info or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't think the teachers or like the school people necessarily knew that they were maybe participating in something that was maybe right. But then the thing about consciousness, what made me think of Severance, my brain's connecting 100 dots right now, is that, you know, before the age of 7, your critical factor hasn't solidified. And so it would be very easy to convince kids that they're just playing a game, and you can partition the partitions we were talking about in the last episode. I think you can partition even an adult's mind and put things behind partitions, use their minds to get them to do remote viewing, and then partition them from even being able to remember that happened.
Basic hypnosis.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to a hypnosis show and you get hypnotized, you know, to bark every time someone says rabbit or whatever, it's similar there. I mean, I'm just thinking you could get people to think that they're playing a game, especially if remote viewing. Like, the most open people would be people that don't know they're doing it.
Yeah.
So you're just having them use their imaginations, and you're just kind of exploiting their imaginations. They don't even know they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to create split personalities in a kid when you can kind of create mini traumas.
Yeah.
And even if that's just, hey, watch this video for a minute with headphones on, and it is frequency, and it doesn't feel scary in the moment, but it is creating a separation in your consciousness. And that you could put partitions up, and a kid could not have any memory of that split. But they are having experiences in it. And it's like you can, you know, you call a kid out of a classroom and they go to a room, and then you do this process. And before they leave, you do another little frequency thing on them that they have no clue. And within an hour, they've actually forgotten everything that happened. And so they never can become aware that there's like something weird going on until, as an adult, they have a regressive memory kind of thing, and then this thing bubbles up. And I think that's what's happening. It's like why it's become a conspiracy. It's that there seem to be a lot of people that have recalled some weird rogue memories that don't connect to anywhere in their life, that they're like connecting that this could be part of that.
Well, you've got consciousness elevating. People are becoming self-aware. They're becoming aware of their internal experience. So that's going to dislodge a lot of memories.
Mm-hmm.
The fluoride thing at school, fluoride's controversial for some reason, but they would straight up wheel this big ass cart into the classroom on a regular basis with these giant pump bottles.
It's not like they're doing that in school. It's like a medical thing. I mean, you do it at the dentist or do something, but like to have and it's just like you have to ask yourself,
since when does the government give a fuck about my health? You know, when is the government offering?
Oh, they care a lot about your health. They want to destroy your health.
Yeah. So it's like, well, we care about the teeth of the children. Do you? Then why the food that's in the, you know, I was on like free lunch my whole life. Like what's with this food that you're feeding me? I can just get straight up sugar snacks but then you're giving me fluoride. There's already fluoride in the water. And I guess in Portland, there wasn't fluoride in the water. I don't know when they started putting fluoride in the water. I think that whole conversation is very strange because that's like, I'm not supposed to swallow my toothpaste. So why am I drinking it in the water? Like, why are you concerned about this? Do you know what I mean? You're letting DuPont, Berry, Toxic, all these companies pump toxic shit into the air and into our food, but you're like really concerned about our teeth.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's fucking odd.
Yeah, I think to me, you have to just assume, I think at certain points, the more information we uncover about ourselves and you start to like realize the nature of reality, and how much emphasis there is behind people that are in control of wanting to keep that control, they will go to any level to do that. And so I think you just have to assume that when we were kids, because we're just these little sponges, there's so much ability to control how an individual's life unfolds by fucking with their consciousness at a young age. You just got to assume that there's subtle, advanced ways that they have developed to do that, and they've been doing it for a long time in just different ways. As technology, is advanced and evolves along with us, they're going to be using that technology, the advanced technology, to, again, just disrupt the natural evolution of a human consciousness. It's like it wants to wake up. It's going to try to do that no matter what. And so to stop that, to slow it down, I just imagine, that there's at the top, whatever beings and energy that is, kind of putting that out or controlling it, that there is potentially they're using tech that is millions of years advanced, like they have invented all the tech that could ever be invented from our perspective now when we look at advancing technology. Right. You've got to assume what is potentially being wielded against us is something that is highly advanced to the point where you can't even deceive it. You don't even understand it. And I think that's it might not even be like what we would consider tech. It's more along this basis of a deep understanding of the consciousness of human beings and being able to control that, And so you got to assume at some point, like that's what we're dealing with here. And that can be a very dark realization in some circumstances, to feel just like, oh, there's no chance. They've got us cornered in every perspective, and they're using some advanced type technology that is like, we can't even conceive. How do you get outside of that, And I do think the message still adheres. It's like, it's all you. It's the personal power is within you, and you can, get outside of that. But I think it's helpful to just look at it that way, that this has been going on for a long time. It's really advanced, and it's not going to stop by pointing it out and talking about it. It's going to stop by like evolving outside of it and really.
You think we should delete this?
Delete what?
What we just said.
Oh, because
I pointed it out.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's I think it's good to just be highly skeptical on a lot of these things, obviously. But I do think when you get some of this dark info, that could be true. It's easy to fall into like victimhood of like, how the fuck do we get out?
I don't feel that way at all. I think I know a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of people that like believe reality is a prison, like is a prison planet or whatever. You're just back into that rabbit hole right now.
Yeah, somewhat. It's one of the ones that I've just been off and on that for so long, like since I started seeking. Like when I first stumbled upon that concept, I was all gung-ho on it, and then I got more information that I was just like, oh, maybe that isn't true, or it's not exactly that way. And then it would bubble up again, and I would embrace it and be like, yeah, that's what it is. And I think it might just be a combination of both, but the biggest thing about the like idea that it's a prison planet that like fucks me up, that I think is just a really good thing to like a practice to take on if this is true. The biggest thing is like the light trap. So we die and we like, everybody says there's a light and you go into the light, and most religious people thinks that's God, that's Jesus. A lot of people that have had near-death experiences report seeing family members or loved ones. They're all there and they're guiding us into the light. So this prison planet idea is that light is a extremely advanced technology. Again, imagine a civilization that has been operating and controlling this realm for millions of years. They've got advanced ass tech. And the whole point does resonate too, that they would want to be able to trap people to not leave. So they have energy and they have beings to control and harvest. And so it seems to be like on maybe other planets or other parts of the universe that there is death is not seen as this like end. Death is seen as an exit, a door kind of. It's a transition. And so you would die and immediately know what happened. You would remember everything. The people that you were in the reality with that, you know, you died from would remember you, and they'd still be able to connect with you. There wasn't this programmed,
like in between every single life, you were getting an aha moment.
Yeah, but it was kind of a like, oh yeah, I know this, and then you decide where you want to go. And if it was, you know, a very uncomfortable reality, you would just be like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so to get people to not do that, to have that aha and then go, I just don't want to be in this reality anymore. I'm going to go to a different one. They needed to, you know, create some kind of deception in that realm, create a something that keeps them here. And so then this whole idea comes up that that's an AI tech. So when you die, you see the light and you have this entire advanced AI kind of system that you plug into then that is going to say, hey, oh, look, you know, the Galactic Federation is here. We've all been talking. You see them over there. This is like your family's over there. We're all here. And you did such a great job. But we really thought like maybe if you wanted to go back, you could work on your relationships a little bit more. This part of your personality wasn't quite right. You remember when this happened, and you see all that's visceral. And then they encourage you to be like, I think there's like this could be really special if you just go back in. You're gonna really hit perfection, and this is gonna be really good for you if you do this. And in that state, you get shocked. You don't have the memories of consciousness being this transient thing. Death's not real. This is just a vehicle. It's a temporary experience. You don't remember any of that. And so they can kind of hijack and take advantage of the emotions that you just had from the life and make you come back thinking, well, you know, the whole time you're just thinking, this is the source, this is the Galactic Federation, this is my family. It all feels real. And so you then go, yeah, actually, you know what? Like, I think I would like to go back and just perfect this a little more. And so you give consent and you go right back in. Boom, memory's gone, and you're having to start all over again. That just makes sense to me on a high level chess playing game of beings that desire to control indefinitely and want to set up really advanced systems to keep people in that. And that could be what we're dealing with. But it's like one of those things where it's just really hard to know. We've never had, I think we've all died before, but we just don't retain the memories of it. It's a foggy feeling to me that I've done it before. But I'm also aware of in those states and like congruent with psychedelic states or meditation, you do get into this core kind of feeling of life that is, it's just easy to kind of be manipulated into thinking something because the overwhelming emotional state that you're feeling is so blissful that I could see how you would just, without enough knowledge and education of it, you would just take what everyone is saying in that state as fact because it feels so aligned and good that it just, like all of that, I don't know, it makes sense to me with the cunningness and deceptiveness, the trickery of this matrix, how advanced that is, that it just feels like that would be something that they would be tempting to do. So a lot of people have said, though, now that are, you know, believe in that prison planet thing, that this trap that they had set, this AI light trap, which is essentially now saying, most of culture is like, oh yeah, when you die, there's a light, go into the light. A lot of people have said that that trap has now been taken down. For what reason, I don't know. Some people are saying the Galactic Federation, the white hats, the good part of it, were able to dismantle that as part of this process of getting enough people to evolve and become autonomous. And so that kind of resonates too. I mean, I would like to believe that. I don't want any more fucking tricks, like even in another realm as I'm trying to pass through. But taking on that idea as truth, I think for me, it makes me very passionate about understanding like who I am and what is actually true and resonant to me, and knowing that I have working to have a very clear consciousness that is directed by me and I'm not able to be manipulated and pulled any direction, because I've worked on my shadows. I know my desires. I'm okay with what I've done. I've cleaned up where I can, all of that to just be stable. So when I die, I will be able to discern what the fuck's going on and not just take it from Joe Schmo who said it's a prison planet online. All these people that like claim they have it, just to keep all of that in mind, but be able to control my own destiny as you go through that process.
Right.
I think that's the message to be pulled from this idea of a prison planet. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But just to be safe, if it is true, I think that's the way to get through it, is to not be able to be deceived, to deeply know who you are and what motivates you and what your goals are. Then I think at that point where that deception, if it is attempted to be pulled, I'll know what to do. I'll know, oh, that's not the light. You guys are tricking me, and turn around and realize I'm in control and I can choose where to go. That seems to be the really cool message from it. It's very difficult because it's an unknown, and we each have to individually practice that ourselves, The idea that I think when we die, you're faced with yourself. That's it. And it's going to present as mom in the corner, Jesus, Galactic Federation, whatever. If we can realize that's like a projection from ourselves trying to get us to realize something, that it's all me, then you can control what happens in that situation,
Well, I mean, if you die and then you start to get pulled in by avatars that you had in a past life, you're still very much attached, which means you're very much tethered.
Yeah, it's like not having an attachment, not having a tether when I'm going into that death portal seems to be like putting the weight on your side, giving yourself an advantage. And those attachments you can deal with like in the reality now. You can clean up whatever kind of mess you've done. If people are still here, you can talk about it. You can just process it and accept it. All of those seem to be very important through the death portal. It's any attachments to the physical reality is going to, tempt us to come back.
Right. But so the prison planet perspective is interesting because the premise, from my understanding, is we're all just souls that are trapped here, just having to live out life after life after life. And I can't remember if it's is it a prison under the premise that we did something bad and we came here, or we came here because we thought it was going to be fun. I don't really believe that the universe is punitive. So anyway, and I can't remember where I heard this. I don't think it was the aliens. But that it's actually really hard to stay, maybe it was Bashar. It resonated really hard. But it's actually really hard to stay asleep. It might have been Mateus DeStefano. It's very hard to stay asleep in the immersive video game. And so quite a bit of effort has to be put forth to stop us from remembering who we are. And then remembering who we are would also just fucking cause us to go through the death portal. And my near-death experience was kind of similar, like the thing that I realized, immediately I was just dead later that night. If we've come here to experience something I think it's kind of materialist of us to assume that we came to Earth as a soul, as an infinite soul, to experience a couple of lifetimes. I think the reality is that whoever came here to experience Earth comes here to experience like an entire round of species existence. So 25,000 years, right? So I think we would lock ourselves into a reincarnation cycle.
Yeah.
And the reality is that if you're asleep enough to fall for trickery in your waking life, when you get knocked out of your body, it's still just exactly your consciousness that you had, but it's like the dream space. I mean, it's just, when I died, it was exactly who I was at the time, was standing in the blue ball of light. And so if I died today, I would be knocked out of my body, but it would be this level of consciousness. And this person, the almost 48-year-old version of me, has discernment and just would go, if my family was standing there, I'm conscious. And so I would just be like, and I understand death. And so I would be running it through all those filters. But let's say this happened when I was 15, before I became conscious. It's like, yeah, of course I'm gonna, if whatever I'm attached to is standing there, like, whatever I still want to accomplish, whatever. But then I also just kind of don't resonate with I guess I have at some point felt like, get me off of Earth. I don't ever want to be here anymore. But I feel like sometimes we're not thinking from the perspective that it never ends. Like, literally, we never end. What the fuck else are you going to be doing? Do you know what I mean?
And that's, from that perspective, I agree. Like, when you can really try to grasp infinite existence, I don't think it's possible to grasp quite what that is from this limited place. But I'm always on the perspective that if we are infinite light beings and like all possibilities of experience are accessible, the boredom that would eventually ensue from knowing everything and knowing what's going to happen and where you're going to go, you would eventually want like a really advanced forgetting system to occur.
Right.
And a very interesting labyrinth to try to get through. And the only reason you're going to get through it is because you don't know. You don't know the answer. We would want that. Like, and I think we would start a very, like, it wouldn't be as advanced. It would just be like one round, and then we'd all come out and be like, that shit was crazy, dude. It was awesome. I forgot that I like was infinite. And I had all these experiences because I forgot. Let's do it again, but let's like up the ante a little bit. And eventually we would get to a place where it's like, from one perspective, you could look at it, it's a prison planet, and they even got a trap on the outside door, that you would want that advance. You would want to be able to figure that out, and you would desire the experiences that come along with a reality that is built like that. And
you have to get locked in. I mean, I don't feel like deeply connected to any of this, and so I've never done past life regression. I don't really interested in past life regression. I really don't feel deeply connected to any of that. I do think that a good portion of my consciousness was a walk-in when I died. And I've heard some interesting things from someone who talks about the forced reincarnation, that the controllers will catch you when you come in and make sure that you have like the most damaging life possible to try to stop you from fully expressing. And so beings that are coming here to help with the awakening will show up later as walk-ins to bypass that
system.
And I do feel connected to I have memories of the young version of me, but for sure, the person I came back as when I died, there's a giant portion of my consciousness that was not activated until that near-death experience. But like...
So that all came online when you came back in.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time I looked at it like someone else took over my body, but I always called it the Jessa who understands how everything works. Like I died the next day. I had all these, like, this ability, and there was a version of me that had powers and stuff that like is not who I was before that near-death experience. And the feeling though is that this version of me was around me when I was young, watching me.
But
like,
you weren't, and you weren't like connected to it.
Right.
Interesting. So it then came online. It almost like prepared the near-death experience so it could come in or something.
Yeah, so I died and I went to the blue ball of light, and then the blue ball of light was talking to me, and I didn't have a body and I was just part of the light. The light felt like home. It was this thing I was like homesick for my entire life. I was there.
And that was primarily a feeling, right?
Yeah, it was all feelings. There was no physical
no visual or anything.
It was the same color blue that you used to get on the TV when your like VCR or your DVD player was whatever. And it was vibrating. And it felt like when you're on the best Molly. And I was a part of this ball and was like, had returned to home to this ball, but also was my own consciousness outside of it. And it talked to me, but the talking was, I just knew what it was saying. And then when I woke up, I could feel my brain translating that to linear language. Mm. And so it said, you did everything you came to do. You went to do, which is weird. You did everything you came to do. You learned everything you had to learn. You may stay here if you want. And so it was very clear that the staying was the easier rewarded option. But if you're willing to go back, we have, there are people for you to help on Earth. And the long version of it, I usually don't tell a long version of it, but was that I said, which people? And then I woke up in the hospital the first time. But in order to get to waking up in the hospital, I had to live my entire life on fast forward to get there. So I was like a baby and then a toddler, and it really felt like that. And then my eyes opened, and it was... one of these Ukrainians that I was hanging out with, it was actually maybe the reason I had died, was trying to kill me. And then my boyfriend at the time, and they didn't like each other, and they both have flowers. And then I could hear, when I woke up for a second, I opened my eyes for a second, I could hear them in the ether bickering about each other. And then I closed my eyes and went back. And there was someone else in the room, and I can't remember who it was, and it could have been the medical professional, but I remember a third energy there, but I can't remember in the physical. So then I was right back in the ball of light, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll go back. And then that was it. I was like, and then I had to live my entire life again to get to that moment. And so that is the thing that makes me think, like, you have to play from the beginning of the human experience. If you are here to play Homo sapien, then you have to start at the beginning and you have to reincarnate through. Otherwise, humans would not evolve. If everything was a fresh soul all the time, we wouldn't actually wake up ever, right? And so I lived my entire life again. This time, and I don't know if I was doing this first time, but this time when I woke up, I was sucking my thumb because I was literally a baby 5 seconds ago. And I can now hear in the ether. I can hear what people are thinking. I don't even know how to describe. It was like all of a sudden, I can see in 4K. There's 100 radio stations playing at once because I can hear what everyone's thinking. I can feel everything. It took me a long time to learn how to like turn down the dials on all those abilities. We get in the car. The Ukrainian is like a backslidden Christian. And so I'm like, there must have been 2 Ukrainians because then I end up with them. Somehow I didn't go with my boyfriend for some reason. And so I was like, we were in the Jack in the Box parking lot, and I was like, I met God, and it's like, I thought I was a backslidden Christian at that point, and all of a sudden I just understood everything, but there was an aspect to me that was not there before, and a huge part of who I am now. I still had all the trauma of the person, I still had all of the shit to work through of the person that I was. Like, she's still here, but the version of me that understands things and like what, like, showed up that day. And so then I slept for about 5 days alone, and I got dropped off in a room that was all blue. We were all obsessed with that. I talked about this, I think, in that song Blue. And so they had paint, and we were all on just so much fucking club drugs, like ketamine and Molly and stuff. And we were in our early 20s. And so we did everything was mirrors and blue. And so I got left alone in this room. And that's when alien school started. I spent 5 days. I was also maybe being poisoned. And well, definitely I was being poisoned. And so there's also a lot of arsenic involved in the next 5 days. And so I was just alone drinking this Kool-Aid, eating this bread, both laced with arsenic, I guess. And in and out of I was in the hypnagogic like the whole time. Like, I didn't have any meth. And so I was in the hypnagogic being like very intensely trained by aliens in this kind of like warehouse school building space that was out. Yeah, it was being like onboarded. But there was an aspect of my consciousness that already knew all this stuff that wasn't there before. So I just didn't have categories of reason for this. So then I just knew I was something important, and a lot of my research, important because I still had hierarchical, like, colonized thinking. And so then all of my research was me trying to like scavenger hunt who I was and what to do with these powers. And I pretty quickly learned that nobody was going to believe me or understand anything that I was talking about. But I would wake people up just to be around me, just listen to me talk. But then once they weren't around me, they would start to get paranoid about me. Anyway, and so I think I was a few months in. I mean, the next 6 months were awful. I couldn't forget the bliss ball. And so I wanted to go back. So I was trying to, there was a point where I was like trying, a couple attempts to take my own life, which did not work. I tried to put myself in the mental hospital, and I said, I'm an alien, and turn it off. And then they put me on like Thorazine and lithium or something, or I don't remember. And it didn't work. And I was in alien school every single night, and just like I'm living in this kind of like tweaker drug life, but then also just kind of 24/7 in communication with these beings. And so then at some point, I want to say 6 months, maybe a year in, I'd have to sit and think about where I was living. I saw an ad in a paper because Portland was already very new age. And so I saw an ad in like Willamette Week or something for a job as an intuitive counselor at a place called Worth on Earth Energy Center in Portland, which is long gone. But I, at this point, like woke up with the ability to read like what I do in sessions now. Like I could do that from the second I woke up. And so I could hear all the subtext in the ether, basically. And so I went to this job interview, high as fuck on meth, and was like, yeah, I could do this job probably, but the job interview is literally this: tell me what you get from me. Like, that's the whole job interview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I could probably do that now, but for years I was like, I tripped out on that because I was like, no, now I know I have to listen to you talk. Like, the information I get is from the tone of people's voice and then what they're saying in the ether in between. Mm-hmm. But anyway, yeah, no fucking pressure. Talk about audition. But so then I was like, I actually need your help. So I told her the story, and she said, oh, it sounds like you're a walk-in. And then that gave me a little bit of context. The internet just wasn't that great yet.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if I told the story on here. The guy, about 2 weeks before I woke up, I was in this just scene with these people who were all kind of simultaneously getting accidentally addicted to meth in the rave scene. And this guy let me live in his house for a bit. And he had like a nice house, and we would end up at his like after hours party. And so it was like the cool place to be. And he gave me a bedroom in his house or whatever. And one time, like it's 5 or 6 in the morning, he said he's like native Hawaiian. And he was telling me about his family. And then he said that my mom's name is Karma. And my family actually sent me here to find someone to tell them that something was he didn't say wake up, but he said so. I didn't understand it because I wasn't in any of this. It hadn't happened to me yet, but he was like, he was basically telling me like, I have a magic family in Hawaii, and we believe something completely different than what you guys believe here. And I was sent here for someone, and I believe that person is you. And I'm supposed to tell you that schizophrenia isn't what people think it is. And then told me about that website, Successful Schizophrenia, which is like still online. And like was trying to explain to me awakening. He talked about walking between the worlds and stuff. And I just thought it was like cool native stuff, but I was very, American. So I'm like, cool. We're just like smoking meth off a tinfoil. And I just didn't think much of it. I did end up one night by myself on Molly going to Successful Schizophrenia right before my awakening and like printing all the pages and then reading them and and there's like in there is like Nietzsche talking about this Ubermensch and shit. Mm-hmm. And so when I died and then was in that house for 5 days, at one point I woke up to drink some of the Kool-Aid, which is also just all the metaphor. There was a fucking Nietzsche, like, thus spoke Zarathustra or whatever was there. I can't find, and I could understand everything it was saying, and I could like read the code in it and shit. It was crazy. Yeah. So it was a deeply supernatural few years. And anyway, what was I talking about that?
Well, I just have one question too, because like what it dawned on me, I've heard you tell that story a number of times. There's one part I hadn't heard before in there, but this prison plan idea, the first thing I thought of is like that, because I've always, the way you tell the story, like I believe that story, and there's so much that you're still kind of figuring out from that experience. But have you ever considered like the possibility that was a deceptive thing to get you to come back?
Yeah.
Like the only thing that kicks off to me that's just interesting, like to think about, is that potentially it's activating, like one of the first things it says is like, you've done good so far, you've checked off everything, but we have a really cool project if you want to do it. Pulling on the thing that's in your programming that you do want to serve and help. You want to help people, it's also, stroking your ego, saying like, you've done everything you needed to do. Like, so you can be done now. But we're also going to tempt something that is a deep desire in you that you maybe have not figured out and worked out yet, is that you want to be special and help people, So the AI like knows how to get you back in by activating those certain parts of you to get you to come back. Now, the only other thing that doesn't like play out with all of that is like, then why would you get all your powers right when you came back? Like they wouldn't want you to do that, right? Because now you're even more balls awake and you're pulling more people into it. So was that a nefarious deception? It doesn't seem like it, because it seems like their plan is being spoiled, specifically by you in a lot of the circles that we're in. So, have you ever thought of that? It's just an interesting, kind of breaks your brain, but.
Yeah, I think that's where I actually heard of the prison planet hypothesis, was when I first started telling that story on podcasts and stuff. I feel like there would be people like reaching out, send me an email to be like, you were deceived, by the Luciferian, whatever. And it's like, what else am I going to be doing? I mean, I feel very tuned into the infinity of it. And I was never able to wrap my mind around eternity. I remember when I was a Christian and people would be making decisions. I can't fathom being a Christian because of you're trying to secure your eternal whatever. I can't perceive things that aren't, I don't know. I'm just like, when am I going to make a decision about eternity? I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. You know what I mean? I couldn't conceive it. I would try to ponder eternity and just like could not conceive forever. But then when I died, it literally never ends. And so it's like, what do I believe that we get trapped here for infinity? No.
Right.
And it's very obvious that we don't get trapped here for infinity. I also am just a staunch believer, because I see it constantly, that you are experiencing the things that your frequency is set to. And you experience that in the death portal or in material world. Yeah, it's very much the same. And so if my energy is synced up to a prison planet, then there must be some sort of part of me that wants to be disempowered. And when I have healed that part of me, do I believe that you can trap sovereign souls that are conscious and self-aware? No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that the universe, that the imagination works that way. And when I feel like, outside of my logical mind, when I feel like what it feels like an escape room. It feels like the point is to get locked into it. And then if there was a reincarnation loop, the purpose of that reincarnation loop, the macro purpose of it, is to literally trap us here for the entirety of the game. Now, the game is, my understanding, like less than 2,000 years from being over. And so now, of course, the thing is taken down. And now, of course, the souls can leave, right? I did get a download in 2019 that reincarnation was over. And that was at the same time that other people who subscribe more to the prison planet said that thing was dismantled. So I do think now, if you die, you can opt out. I don't think that souls I think if you're conscious, that if you died or I died, like, we could just opt out. And I think that's what we will see, kind of a mass exodus from the game as people like graduate, or people who have to start over. But if you started this game 25,000 years ago and you haven't woken up, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could just keep getting recycled back into the thing. You have to remember who you are if you want to go home.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah, so it's almost like it is a prison planet, but it isn't, in the way that it's like it's an opt-in. It's a psychological prison planet. So, but that, again, it's all gamified on a higher level, like macro wise. That's a sick ass game to go into. But then there's just fundamental parts of it. It's like, if you start this game, you're going to be locked in. If I'm making that decision from a point of infinity, who the fuck cares? Great. Right. I'll go do this for a bit. But then it is like you become immersed in it, and you're like, you are it, and you've purposely been, meant to not remember that. So to get out is like, you got to remember who you are. It's like literally the only way to get out. And I think even knowing that coming into it, if I knew that it was like, there's only one way out and you got to remember, but we're going to make it really difficult for you to remember. Again, I'm like, cool, sign me up. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
From the perspective of being like, having 20 lifetimes in a row, that's just all torture and pain. Yeah, that's going to suck. But if you can tap into that point of consciousness that like you chose it and you want it, then it can be exciting.
That first year, I'm just looking back at this. I don't guest on podcasts that much, so I don't tell that story as much anymore. And now with the last 5 years of perspective, and I have so many more points of awareness now, I can see things from more perspectives than I could see back then. It is interesting to look at, like, when I was in the blue ball of light, which is home, whatever that is for me, you know, I was outside of pain and suffering. And the thing that really stood out to me as I was kind of unpacking it over the next whatever was how much innate suffering there is in just a moment. Like not even the situational suffering, but just the suffering of what I would now say is separation consciousness, right? And how just completely free I was of that in the moment. And then even the fact that I went back to the hospital room and two people, I guess, that were important to me at the time, but like also, you know, were just people I had known for a year or something. And was immediately back in my body where there's the pain and the suffering or whatever. And then went back and just kind of willy-nilly said, yeah, I'll go back. Which was a very much like what would be a sacral decision. And I do this all the time. Like I make a sacral decision because that's my kind of gut instinct. And then once that timeline has started, a lot of times I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? You know, and it's like, well, I wasn't thinking. The grief that I felt for the next year until I kind of forgot what that bliss felt like was so heavy. And I think that it is part of the melancholy that people feel now as they become increasingly more conscious is very close to that grief. Because the more conscious you become, the kind of closer you are to that unity consciousness, like what it feels to be like united and aware, but you're still living in separation consciousness. Right. And so I think that aching suffering is running in the background. And when you're unconscious, you can just chase things outside of you.
Yeah.
And we talked about this like in Melancholy of the Infinite Awareness, but that was so loud. And it took about a year for me to forget what that felt like. But for a long time, I could just touch it. And I was so bereft. Is that a word? I was grieving that so bad. And so I tried to, that's a bit morbid, I tried to hang myself and then I ate a bottle of pills. Both times I just woke up on a slightly different timeline. I didn't understand timelines until 17 years later, but I can now look back and go, oh, those are just a fucking timeline jumped. I saw a UFO one night. I ran screaming, crying at it to take me. I felt so alone. The fact that I couldn't get anyone to see what I was seeing or understand what I was saying. And it wasn't like people thought I was nuts, but they're all nuts. They're on fucking meth. Yeah, I had to get over the part of me that deeply regretted choosing to come back. And now when I look back, I connect to the part of me that was in the bliss and was immediately bored with it.
Yeah.
Was immediately unattached to staying in the bliss.
Yeah.
Was immediately like, throw me back in the fucking suffering. And I had to stop comparing what I now know as separation consciousness to the unity. But yeah, I had just gotten home and like immediately was like, because I don't even know that I was self-aware enough to know that there was a homesickness in the background until I went home and then was like, oh, that's homesickness. That's that thing where I just felt like I was a square peg in a round hole my whole life. So I do think part of the melancholy that we will just have to learn how to navigate moving forward is that when you bring conscious awareness into your separation consciousness experience, especially in this window where everyone's not awake yet, you know, it does kind of shine a light on the wound of separation that you have to learn how to sit with that melancholy. And I did not know how to sit with anything at that point. And so I just wanted to go back. And then after the pills, I went straight from I woke up days later from a bottle of pills, and hilariously, the guy who was trying to kill me before was now taking care of me. And then I stole someone's car and went and locked myself in the psych ward and told them everything and was like, obviously I'm crazy, make it stop. And the drugs did not make it stop. And when I got out, then I like surrendered to like, okay, well, I picked what I picked and I'm not allowed to leave. And so I think if you would have introduced Prison Planet to me at that moment where I felt very trapped, I could have probably gotten sucked into it, looking at it a completely different way. But there was something about the aliens that was just, I don't know, there was a knowing in me that understood that what was being said was true, even though my categories of reason hilariously interpreted it.
Right.
Really literally, a lot of it very literally, and really thought the work that I was being trained for was going to happen immediately and not in 20 years, you know?
I think that's my biggest challenge, is that melancholy feeling, man. It's so rogue and like sometimes comes out of nowhere and I just don't know how to solve it. Like all my rationality around it doesn't really work. But it makes sense, like what you were just saying. It's that feeling of separation combined with a knowing that is not separate.
Right.
But you like can't get the feelings to match, right? And it's because ultimately it's like we are very separate in this body. And when you're just in that thinking, it's painful, you know. But at the same moment, I can know that that's an illusion and that I'm like purposely in this thing, and just trying to deal with that paradox is such a challenge. It's also like really beautiful at the same time, because there's something about like everything that I've experienced that has been painful and dark has this beautiful quality to it, because all together it's meaning something bigger and it's helping, you know, change occur. But like sitting in it, kind of accepting all of that as real and beautiful, and also then feeling like I can't go change it really, and it's just infinite experience, is like, it's just a very weird paradoxical kind of feeling, man, that it comes and goes, but when it's there, man, I just don't know. It's difficult. It's like, I don't know, it is beautiful, but it's like fucking painful.
Yeah, you have to be able to hold the entirety of the experience. And separation consciousness makes it to where what we actually are, which is one big thing, gets to hold and truly experience every little piece of it. But as you start to come out of separation consciousness, there is that, I don't know, it's almost as if you're simultaneously tuned into the big you that's one with everything. And I think that when people talk about one with everything, it's very easy to like love and light that concept. Yeah. But it's like, you understand that one with everything means all the ugliest parts, right? You understand that's one with serial killers, the worst people you've ever known, like that you're holding the entirety of the shadows and the whatever. This is not just good vibes, you know? Yeah.
The power to that too is like, I've embraced that at certain parts of my life where you're trying to understand and rationalize some other person being so evil or so mean, that when you actually can you tap into a part of yourself that would do that, there's like a side that you can tap into and go like, a part of me that would be really frustrated or unhealed or is like experiencing the same thing this person's experiencing, I would do that too. And I would also do this and this. And so you can, if you could tap into that, you can kind of understand what that other being is doing, what they're motivated by. And also you can kind of predict what they're going to do next when you really accept, like, there's a part of me that would do that. The oneness, you know, not maybe a part of me, Mark, that is not showing up that way right now. But like, you can really be honest and go, oh shit, there's a side of me that when I was unhealed or was put in the like perfect situation and got triggered, like I would be doing that. And really embodying it as your own, like you can kind of understand what the next step is, or just how to deal with it, how to get out of the way of it or whatever, you know. And part of that for me, to get deep into that is to really own it as your own. And there's times where I've just understood like systems and society and stuff when you really tap into the negative part of it and like own it in a way, it gives you more information of how to deal with it and kind of how to get out of it. But I think a lot of people are really resistant to that. They want to see themselves as divine and holy and only love, forgetting that there's this whole other kind of spectrum of experience that, you know, we've all been a part of at some point, and maybe now we're not caught up in that. We're trying to harmonize and love, but you can tap in and really understand what somebody else or entire systems are doing when you can feel it in yourself that you would do that same thing too, you know, if the situation was different. It's been really, really helpful for me.
Well, yeah, if you had the exact same genetic makeup as that person and the exact same childhood as that person and the exact same life experience as that person, you would be showing up exactly how that person's showing up.
Yeah.
I have to go to the bathroom really bad. Is it recording?
Yeah.
You want an ASMR of me eating jackfruit chips?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Fucking
Mark's a huge ASMR fan.
I just don't like ASMR. I like certain elements of that. Like when I'm kind of doing it myself, there's certain sounds and things that I enjoy, but listen to somebody on a microphone go.
Do you have misophonia? Do you have the thing where people eat in front of you and it fucking stresses you out?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's hard for me not to focus on if someone is eating loud and obnoxious. Like I glitch. I can't focus on anything else but that. And it's very uncomfortable for sure.
You picked a weird partner for that.
Yeah, I sometimes have to just, I've gotten better at ignoring it. And there's something about when you do it, I guess probably just because I love you, that it's like endearing. There's something it's just like your jaw pops and makes crazy sounds because you got fake teeth in it. It's just kind of like there's nothing you can do to stop that. And when you're enjoying your food, it's fucking loud. But yeah, I've embraced it with you. A bit more, but yeah, I used to have, there was like my sister's, one of my sister's old bosses was like really, really bad with it. And was kind of just a difficult person in general. But my sister would always, she has it too. She would just like text me or call me and be like, I can't stand it anymore. Yeah.
Aaron had it really bad, and I have to eat every couple hours, otherwise I start to feel dizzy. And so we would be driving from one state to another to do a show, and I would need to eat a Cliff Bar, and I would be trying to eat it as quiet as possible, but he would get like woozy and have to like hang his head out the window. And that's like at like peak attachment shit for me, where now I would just be like, yeah, bitch, hang your head out the window. I would take it so personally. So when you and I first met, and then 6 weeks later, we ended up living together because of the pandemic, I would make my food and wander into the other room. I don't know if you noticed that. I had so much trauma from that relationship.
Yeah. Well, don't worry about it anymore. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'm like weirdly attracted to, because my ex-husband was like that too. Like I'm weirdly attracted to men that are sensitive to that, but then the acoustics when your teeth are made out of acrylic, it's a lot. It's actually better now than it was because now I have the implants, but like when they were glued in, it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't really bother me. Why is the sound of cats eating so nice though? Does that bother you?
Not normally. No.
No.
It's not something I'm like into. There's a lot of weird sounds. Yeah, like little, like those sounds, not into really.
I feel like the reason you wouldn't like the ASMR videos is because they're the way that people are behaving.
A lot of the time, it's the way that people are behaving. There's certain, I've tuned into a couple of them that I'm like, oh, I like this, and I enjoy watching people, put their hands in goop and stuff, and some of the sounds with that. But when you get these like people that are really into it, that are kind of almost, they're like doing it in a therapeutic way. So they're like kind of even pulling you into kind of meditation or something, and they're like that whisper.
Well, they're scratching their fingernails on the mic.
I don't know what it is. It just makes me like I gotta scroll. I feel like I'm being like if somebody walks in and I have that on, like I feel like I'm being caught masturbating or something. I'm like caught in this very vulnerable, weird. Like it isn't anything. I randomly scrolled on it. I don't know what that was.
I don't know how long I want to podcast, but I was thinking, I sent you a TikTok or a reel, I guess, of a comedian talking about the telepathy tapes. And it was like an edgy, not conscious, not into this sort of stuff at all comedian who seems to have been listening to the telepathy tapes, and he kind of references them for a second and then no one acknowledges it, and then you can see he kind of gets embarrassed for a second. Like, I think that we are, and I remember getting a download about this, that like 2024 was going to kick off like the biggest pocket of awakening, and I think we're going to have a shit ton of baby aliens, like quickly initiated people in the grid here in a short time. I think that podcast is probably triggering mass awakening, which I don't know. Sometimes I feel like everyone's going to wake up just because the reality is just going to be conscious. And I think probably everyone's going to wake up to the supernatural, because I do think there will be like some sort of alien disclosure, whether or not that's real, who knows. But the telepathy tape, science is starting to merge with consciousness. And so maybe that's just going to slide in to reality. And a lot of these people are just going to kind of naturally start to be conditioned by higher dimensional awareness. But awakenings are typically pretty fucking messy and come with a lot of, psychosis. And I guess there's been a lot of psychosis for the last 5 years, if you're on the internet, But telepathy tapes is not targeting, but, I think it's hitting home with a lot of deeply materialist people.
Yeah. Making them finally question a difficult question.
Yeah. And then you've got the dismantling of the empire, which is right on schedule for anybody freaked out by that. Has to get broken down. It's fine. And then these outer planets are shifting in the next couple of months. I mean, I think we've already had the nodes change, and then Saturn's going to go into Aries for the first time. I think it moves back afterwards, but it's going to go into Aries. And then Neptune into Aries. That's a lot of Aries energy. Aries like fire. It's also the child. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's the initiation. It's the beginning of something, which I guess would, especially with Neptune there, would support a mass awakening. And then going from Uranus and Taurus, just kind of fucking up everyone's like safety and security, going into this really kind of fast mental mercurial energy. This is going to be a fucking bonkers couple of years.
Yeah.
I see 2025 and 2026 is the same for some reason. It's like whatever the energy is working through there feels very similar to me. kind of the same way that I see 2020 and 2021 were the same thing. I think that there are a lot of similarities between 2020 and 2021 as the next 2 years for people who are still very attached to the cross of planning. I think the people who began to detach from the cross of planning, and that doesn't mean you quit your job, but just like started to individuate and dehomogenize, I think we'll find this easier to navigate. But I think for people still deeply entrenched in the illusion, this may feel like similar, a couple of years to them. But then when you add the added, now we did have a mass awakening in 2020 as well. And now all the people who mass awoken in 2020, not all of them, but a lot of them have finished their baby alien phase and are maybe able to hold some space. But it's a lot of psychosis.
Yeah, because the psychosis seems to be, maybe it's not always this way, but it's like a part of the awakening process. It's a 100%. Part of this deconstructing what you thought reality was, trying to embrace what newly is. It's just, it loosens all the bearings, and being able to ground out of that and stand up and engage in the reality and actually individuate is just, there's no blueprint for it. Like each individual is different. And so how long that psychosis lasts, if you can get out of it, that's an intense thing to imagine, a bunch of people going through it once. I like to think that there's some process that, like, the people that are going through it first makes it easier for the other people that come afterwards. And so it maybe doesn't have to necessarily look like crazy chaos for a certain like a long period of time, because people will be able to adjust and they'll have the support and people like guiding through that. But yeah, it seems like an inevitable part of awakening is that, like, the psychosis thing. And when you got a bunch of people going into it, and then a bunch of conspiracy theories and a bunch of false ideas of what that process is, you get a lot of traps for people to get stuck in psychosis for a long period of time or not be able to ground out of it, you know?
I mean, I would say that and I would have to look up what the official definition. What's the official definition of psychosis? So what I'm talking about, I would call like the valley of the shadow of death. Like, you have the reality that you've been a part of, which is just a series of programs and assumptions based on consensus reality. And then you have the reality that exists when you have all the other points of awareness. And so there's taking reality at face value. And then there is heightened awareness, meaning more awareness, meaning zoomed up higher so you can see more of the picture. As you start to see more of the picture, and you still have the categories of reason of this or that, I think is really you still have all this conditioning from, specifically here in the United States, whatever this culture or lack of culture is. So then you start to take things that you're taking into your heightened awareness, and you're running them through the filter of it's this or that absolute truth. And so this is where you get someone who's like, maybe you perceived a ghost, or maybe you perceived being communicated with by an alien. Well, if you don't yet know that your individual reality is yours, and that other people can't see it, and that it's not absolute capital T truth, and it's not for you to evangelize, like the evangelism, the proselytization, the cramming your belief system down other people's throats, like all of these low vibrational things that are a part of the culture that we're deeply conditioned into. You then take these things that you're taking in, you don't know how to sit with them, you don't know how to hold ceremony, you don't know how to hold paradox. And so you end up trying to run them through those filters, or present them to other people, or force them down other people's throats.
Yeah, you quickly apply that binary thinking to a non-binary experience, something that is like, paradoxical. And if you're running it through other binaries, then that's when you get, religious ideology and stuff like this. My experience, it was Jesus, it was God. You have to save yourself. You have to become Christian to do this, all of that stuff.
Well, that's huge. That's the fucking New Age to Christian pipeline.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of it is I've been thinking about this a lot for a couple different reasons, but because we are this weird homogenized individualist society, there are not elders or anything to like support people through this. Yeah. And then the New Age movement is just kind of this like half hijacked thing being run by, it's decentralized and that it's all over the place, but it still has so much of that colonized conditioning that it just keeps kind of re-expressing this thing. But then you've got people who've been awake for a fucking year, channeling who fucking knows what, and then they end up running into a demon, and then they run back to Christianity because they're fucking terrified, right? The DSM-5 defines psychosis as a severe mental state characterized by the presence of one or more following symptoms: hallucinations, perceiving things that aren't present, such as hearing voices; disorganized thinking, which is incoherent speech, jumping from topic to topic. Well, fucking call me psychosis. Grossly disorganized or abnormal behavior, agitation, catatonia, unpredictable actions, and negative symptoms, reduced emotional expression, lack of motivation. Psychotic symptoms are seen in conditions like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, blah, 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 blah. The NIMH defines psychosis as a mental condition in which a person has trouble distinguishing between what is real and what is not. That's what I was looking for. The WHO defines it as a condition that affects the mind, causing a person to lose contact with reality.
So it's crazy. All of these descriptions, like, you could also put behind spiritual awakening.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we've done a episode on spiritual psychosis before, but there is definitely the behaviors, and there are definitely like, I get a lot of emails and shit from people who are in psychosis and people that I've had communication with before and they were not in psychosis, and then all of a sudden they're like, I'm supposed to give you a message and you need to do what I say, otherwise the moon is gonna run into the whatever. And that's why I'm very passionate about mental health resources for people who are going through an awakening. I wish I was better at organizing. Maybe I'll manifest this by saying this on this podcast, but if you go to the pinned post on my Patreon, there is like a directory of various mental health practitioners who are conscious. I wanted that to be like on my website in like a fancy page or whatever, but I just want it to be something that people can fill out, and I don't want to run it, so that just people can find those resources, because there is like, psychosis exists, but every awakening isn't psychosis.
Right.
And so there is, but they are kind of also the same. I don't know. It's like, you can fly too close to the sun in your consciousness journey. You can start to have supernatural experiences without the grounding or the self-awareness. This is why I think self-awareness is the most important part of spiritual awakening, because if you have these shadows of, we all have all these, we all have a lot of shadows, but like saviorism, if you're emotionally immature and you haven't had any kind of healing work around your desire to be like grandiose, whatever, these things can get caught up in the awakening process really easily. And especially, I think it's called dialectical thinking, like the this or that.
Yeah.
This or that black or white thinking is directly opposed to higher states of consciousness, because higher states of consciousness require us to be able to hold complexity and hold paradox. And if you believe this or that, or you're really trapped in the good or bad mythology, it's very easy for expanding consciousness to turn into psychosis. I would define psychosis, like actual spiritual psychosis, as kind of those descriptions, in that you are not able to hold the paradox that the reality you are experiencing is not necessarily the reality that other people are experiencing. And it's like you're now in a kind of self-obsessed. I think it's when you start to become harmful to yourself or others, is when, you feel like everyone else needs to recognize the thing that you're seeing or whatever. It's like you're not holding enough paradox probably to.
And it's like, I think we almost have to like experience that fringe, that edge. And that's why, like I'm saying, it's kind of a part of awakening, is like what they're calling psychosis. It's not permanent, but it's like something that you have to experience, that paradoxical part, and then learn to embrace it. And so you kind of have to go to the edge, go off a little bit, and get a reflection back in the reality that this isn't sustainable, and something's still not making sense here. I think the deconditioning is the biggest part of it. Is like you have some aha moment, and then you start absorbing all of this higher information that is all paradoxical, and then, like you said, running it through the binary that is just all conditioning, is where the psychosis starts to occur, because like they're two incompatible things. But on one level the higher stuff is so real, you experienced it, it's true, but you can't get it to fit in to the reality to communicate to other people. So everybody thinks you're in psychosis and you've lost it,
Yeah, and because a lot of people define psychosis as you just believe you see something that other people don't see, or you believe something that we haven't collectively decided is a fact.
Yeah.
And so the mere definition of psychosis will change drastically in the coming years, because we will realize that reality, like consensus reality, is bullshit. But it's that journey from consensus reality to being able to hold your own version of reality while being conscious of the fact that other people are holding their own.
Yeah,
and so it's when
complex.
you leave consensus reality, but you still are conditioned by consensus reality.
Yeah.
So you are trying to get everyone else into it. There are certain times where I call it like download energy or whatever, where I am manic. I seem manic, often during eclipses. Apparently not during the last eclipses, were not fun. But typically during eclipse season, I feel pretty unhinged. And I've just learned that I won't podcast during those times. And I keep all the theories that are coming to me to myself. And I understand that I'm naturally going to ground on the other side of it, And like I said, I was very fortunate to go through that awakening, which was definitely chock full of psychosis, just around people who were on drugs. And so the psychosis wasn't as much of a liability. I'm just remembering that in 2019, I had this same feeling about this kind of mass awakening about to happen. But the imagery that I saw, it's before I met you, but the imagery that I saw was a bunch of people hiding in their houses, thinking that they had lost their minds and were afraid to let anyone know what was happening to them because they thought that they would go crazy. And I saw masses of this, right? And I thought, how are all these people going to be like hiding in their houses, was the thing that I thought. Like, because that's the impression I got. They weren't going to work. They weren't socializing. They were like hiding. And then the pandemic happened and a fuck ton of people woke up, and they woke up in the privacy of their own homes. Yeah. And they were hiding and thinking that maybe they were crazy. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know that I think this one's going to be much more like kind of differentiated. I can't tell like what vibe I get. Because in some ways, there are a lot of people that wake up now and they just wake up and it's almost like they have to go on their finding themselves journey, but they're just kind of immediately plugged into the higher consciousness part and they don't quite go through all that like psychosis
they're a little more
part.
Grounded, yeah.
And that's because of all of us in the grid.
That's what I'm thinking. It's becoming a little bit easier for that experience to happen to an individual and then immediately look in the reality and not feel super alone. There are other people going through it. There are people grounded. There's different theories. There's information. It's now not as like alarming when you have the individual experience that you can't fit into the reality. So it's a bit easier.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of those experiences of flying too close to the sun and being ungrounded that I knew of the concepts of grounding and but I kind of just thought I was invincible and like, yeah, I'm grounded. I don't need to go do that though. I'll just naturally like find the grounding. And I think it was just at one point, like I was kind of like that for a while, like just being really up in my head and not super tuned into other people's individual experiences. And there's just something about it. It's hard to describe. I mean, like for me, I felt like I got so far out of my reality that there was like a couple things like that I experienced. I don't know. A couple of them were in psychedelic states. A couple of them were not, but that made me like, I couldn't rationalize the experience in a way that like made sense to me. It's like so hard to describe that allowed me to like continue being alive and like being in my reality without like understanding why it happened or something. So like I couldn't, the phenomena occurred, the feelings all occurred, and it was like out there. It was like a macro vision, but because I was not, paying attention to grounding and being in the body, I couldn't rationalize it. Like I couldn't understand it and bring it back into the body. And so I was just left with this floating feeling that the best way I can describe it was that I felt what infinity was maybe, but I was alone in it. And I didn't know how to direct myself or like get into a world that I felt grounded. It was as if I felt like I was almost like I was a deeply like handicapped being that had an amazing imagination and a mind that could think and ponder things, but like didn't know how to feel the experience and like ground it into my being. And so I don't know, there was like a month of time that I was afraid of my consciousness. I was afraid of the expansiveness of the reality, and I couldn't turn it off and go back to naivety and like forget that it happened. But I didn't know how to ground it in. And so it's just this extremely floating feeling and nowhere to retreat, where like I used to be able to retreat into sleep, into dreams. But like I knew that was not a safe place either, or like that was it real or was it not? Like everything was just so up for grabs that like it's just a very scary feeling. And that was the closest I had ever been to being like, oh, I need to get out of here. I want to make this stop, and I can't escape into a meditation, into psychedelics. I can't escape. I can't get away. Like,
right.
And part of me knew that when I died, like I wasn't going to be able to escape it either. And so that like just directionalist and like what ways up and down, grounding. Who am I? Who are these people? What is God? Like, it's so scary, man. And that was the first time that I finally understood. I was like, oh, the importance of grounding, the importance of not just seeking knowledge and not being able to like pull it into and be actionable with it, like actually embody it, that's what you have to do, because like there's just no going this mind way. Like,
right.
It'll blow you out to a point where you lose perception and don't know how to ground. And the only scary part about that is that people, when you're in that state, like I was highly impressionable because I needed to be saved. I didn't want the thing anymore. So somebody tell me what this is. And if it even slightly makes sense, I'm taking it and running with it because I don't want this fucking feeling anymore. So in that moment, if they were like, oh yeah, I know what you're experiencing, it's because you're detached from Jesus. You need to if you just get in line with Jesus, he will protect you in those moments and he will lead you.
Yeah.
Then I'd be like, fuck, sign me up. Where do I need to do? Because it was so uncomfortable and there's no escaping it. And so that's what I think is like a little scary about a bunch of people going to psychosis. If you have a very intriguing individual that's got all the answers for you, and will lead you into a different kind of cell, a different kind of limitation, you're just so vulnerable to it that you'll do it, because that existential crisis that you're experiencing is the most fucking uncomfortable thing ever, that you'll take any relief from it, even if it is a whole nother deception of lies. If I can ground into that deception of lies and feel temporarily safe, like Jesus has got me, then I'm there.
I'm really curious to see what happens. I can't quite put my finger on with the telepathy tapes, because it also matters the way that you wake up, right? So like people who wake up through, let's say, a twin flame journey, which is where you come in contact with another human whose energetic signature is in resonance enough with yours. Some think they share a soul. I think you're just like on the big quilt of souls. You're right next to each other. And that's just a hard mirror. And it helps you see yourself. And then all the pining and the longing for the person is actually the pining and the longing to wake up. And so those people tend to end up like in deep longing for love for a while. And then, people with near-death experiences often kind of, it's a shortcut in many ways. And then people for whom it's psychedelics, it just, you like pick a template.
Yeah.
And then the experience kind of goes from there. I think telepathy tapes as a mainstreaming telepathy, there's several different directions it could go. I think I guess for some people it might result in like deifying nonverbal autistic people as like not recognizing it as it's a latent ability in all of us. And the reason that nonverbal people can access it so easily is because they're not verbal, and so they don't have the materialist senses drowning out all of the other senses. And they're also probably, because they're being perceived by mainstream society as, well, if you're not verbal, you must not be in there. They're not getting programmed, I think, the same way that we all are being like deeply conditioned into the matrix. So I think maybe for a lot of people, it'll be like, oh, I believe that telepathy exists in this one specific container. But for the people that it causes them to start rabbit holing and finding out, oh, this whole other conscious world exists, it could be a lot. I think that the shifts that are coming are just going to cause mass psychosis anyway. And we've been dealing with a lot of mass psychosis since 2020. But if we're defining psychosis as not being tuned into reality, or how did it say it? Losing grip with reality.
Yeah.
What is reality? And when the entire fabric of what you've known to be reality is being rewritten right in front of your face, people don't know where to put their feet.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to stand, And so I think as the cross of planning evaporates right out from underneath us and the cross of sleeping phoenix, I think there'll be psychosis in kind of every direction. There already has been, but I think some of it calmed down, and I think it's going to and not just the people listening to that podcast. I think people that are super politically invested on both sides are about to get kind of pushed through a portal of consciousness as well, because the cross of sleeping phoenix is here to talk to you about your own personal power and not a power outside of you. And
Yeah.
so I think the people that for whom this dude is the president is their higher power, they'll feel betrayed. And there's like a hopelessness, I think, that is supposed to come during this changing of the guard, because the cross of planning, I have to do some research on where it is, but the cross of planning has a construct about God that made us deeply religious in this, like dogmatically religious, not spiritual.
Yeah.
And so when it leaves, there is supposed to be a vacuum that kind of is created by, like, people can't access that hope for a God that they previously had. And so that mass exodus to Christianity feels exactly the same to me as the Make America Great Again fantasy that people are trying to play out, which is what Make America Great Again is saying is, I can bring the cross of planning back.
Right.
And what Christianity is telling people right now is like, this is it. This is the curtain call. And, we're going to get to blah, blah, blah. Like, we can bring the cross of planning back. I mean, it's everything saying I can bring the cross of planning back. I think on the other side of 2027, people are not going to be able to entertain that fantasy, and no one's going to be able to sell that fantasy. And that's when people who haven't deconditioned and haven't started to sync up to the new energy are really going to hit that kind of fucking wall.
That hopelessness.
Of hopelessness.
Yeah, because you were always led to believe like you could find God outside yourself. And that was like always in the subconscious is like there's a hope there. When that finally gets popped, and oddly, you realize the even cooler truth that like you are God, that we're all a sliver of that. To readjust your direction and meaning in life to that is like very scared, and it's a weird thing to do. That it's just you're gonna hit a time of hopelessness to adjust to that. It's a big wake up call for sure. I
mean, not waking up until the shit has already. I mean, there's so much, like, not waking up to your own power until after the system has completely fallen that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Not waking up to consciousness and self-awareness until after any fantasy or hope of a God coming to save you has been ripped from your hands is also a lot. To do both of those at the same time is going to be very intense.
This is why I think that idea that Wave Series talks about, that there's an attempt for 4D STS beings to control people there too. Mm-hmm. This is their feeding ground right here. This is why they try to attempt to pull out all these other traps, is because if you can get people into that hopelessness, that existential floaty feeling like I was talking about, like they're so impressionable, they will do anything just to get the feeling of that again.
Yeah.
And so they, there's going to be all kinds of other things mocked up as a perfect entrance for those people to go into and feel safe, feel at home. That's also just another, trick. And so I think that's what maybe the risk of like kind of hitting the bell late and waking up is like you're going to have to go through a lot of those new kind of deceptions that are being set up. It's also why I think it's really important to go through that heavy part of like spiritual awakening, is to be somewhat alone, to be able to, so you're not impressionable. You don't get pulled into that. It's also a risk though, because it's like, it's difficult to do by yourself. So, but yeah, that makes sense to me why that 4D STS thing to control on the other side is like, what a ripe time to grab beings that are being forcefully thrown into like a perception change that's so large that they don't know what to do with it. It's easy just somebody to come in and be like, I know exactly what's happening to you. This is what you should do. Just come this way.
Right. But then you got the background frequency just hitting you with a fire hose of personal power, mm-hmm. autonomy. There's no more powerful gate than the 34th gate. Like, it's raw human power. And that's why the potential at the shadow frequency is that people become incredibly violent or whatever because it's so much power and people are really very tuned into their own power. However, it's also got the now. So it's like it's the present moment. So the background frequency, the most vulnerable people in this situation, ironically, are the people who are looking to be not in their power.
Yeah.
But then they get hit with that background frequency just grinding on personal power, the present moment, intimacy, authenticity, abundance. And so it's very interesting. I don't know. I cannot wait to see how the next couple of years turns out. I think for those of us that are resistant to stepping into our own power, there will be a lot of difficulty because reality will be pushing you to step into your own power. And so for people who are still looking to the government to guide them or tell them what to do, or the system to take care of it, that will be heavily pressurized because the background frequency is pushing in the direction, conditioning in the direction of personal power. And so how can I be in my own power is the question, right?
Yeah.
To everything. How can I be autonomous?
This is why the human design shit is so powerful right now. I think it's the best way to understand, get a compass on where you're going as an individual, what needs to be conditioned, and seeing those two background frequencies, understanding both of those, and then being able to really step into this deep individual autonomy. Human design is just it's fucking made for that,
100%.
For me, it's helped so much get a clear kind of map to what is actually occurring. That's easily, you can easily get pulled into a lot of deception of what's going on in the new age world. But human design is just it so clearly lays it out, and there's so much tactile work to be done that you can experiment with your own energy that quickly helps the individuation kind of happen. And yeah, it's it's so funny. I just can't imagine without that information, the human design stuff, this would all just be a lot more confusing to me, I think.
100%. I mean, it's literally a practice of differentiation.
Yeah.
Learning how to get into your own sphere. I've run out of steam.
Yeah, I'm about good to go too. Yeah, I've still got sessions. Speaking of human design and how helpful it is, I can do my best at helping you get into your authenticity and decondition. Or just as a creative, I'm very turned on by talking to people about their creative expression and how to do it.
Well, don't tell him
I'm not sexually turned on.
He's I'm horny to help you with your art.
I'm sexually turned on when Jessa's trying to get into her creativity. No, just kidding. All right. That's enough. Let's go. I love you. Bye. I always got to make it some kind of fun. Jessa's sexual.